What's up, everybody? We're back for the latest edition of the News Pod. I'm here with Free Toaster co-founder Nick Madrid. I am Carlos Caro, your host on the Free Toaster podcast. Every week, we read and review thousands of articles at the intersection of consumer lending, marketing, and technology. And we drop a curated email every week to our subscribers on Wednesdays with a handful of stories that we think are noteworthy. One of the stories this week was the follow-up to TU's acquisition of Monevo. Before we cut to that, I want to pause to thank our sponsors, Bulldog Media Group, Spinwheel, and Fintel Connect. Nick, what did you see when you dug into the TU filings?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Our second story was about Transunion's earnings, which seemed pretty good. In retrospect, we probably should have caught this sooner, but it is what it is, and we're covering the news pod, which is great. Before I get there, what's interesting is I have an education in studying financial markets and so forth. For the advent of AI, one of the biggest things that I was taught and realized is there's so much information buried in footnotes. And so as we were going through the actual report for Q1 of 2026, it was interesting to see one particular thing. So buried on page 4 in a footnote talks about the revenue growth assumptions for Transunion overall, and then there's a line item for Monevo, and it says, number 1, sub B, the impact of a Monevo acquisition is expected to be immaterial for Q1 26 and for FY, so for fiscal year 2026. So for the entire year, at face value, it seems like they don't see any material impact to the business.
Nick, you used to do, was it buy side or sell side?
Yeah, I worked at Bloomberg, and then I have a CFA charter, and I have a master's in finance. So I worked a lot with sell-side analysts in terms of reading their analysts, producing consensus reports. And so I read many, many types of reports like this.
Is immaterial a nice way of saying it's zero?
It's probably a nice way of saying it, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I read it too. Which actually is a little surprising to me, to be honest with you. But we'll break it down here in a second. But I was under the impression, and I'm going to go back to my conversation with Greg, because we had him on the pod last year. But one of the things that stood out to me is the UK Monevo business was rocking, was what I remember. Revenue generating, good business. So my impression was TU was buying that already working business. And then what they were betting on was the upswing and the uptick in the US market with the same technology, just leveraging their relationships in this market. I would have at least imagined a few $1 million, Nick, but maybe in the context of TU's earnings, $5 million in revenue is still immaterial. It's possible.
Well, let's do this. Are you okay to drop a bunch of knowledge on me? If I come in with a very just basic understanding of Monevo, and you can help and our listeners kind of unpack that?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
I took some notes. Let's start with just basic notes. So elevator pitch for Monevo is a credit pre-qualification and distribution platform operating primarily in the US and the UK. What is that? Who else does that?
I immediately start thinking model hosting and offer hosting. So you can start to imagine, for many of our listeners, they're familiar with Credit Karma's Lightbox. They're familiar with Experience Activate, Credit Sesame's Connect, MoneyLion's Engine platform. So these are systems that basically house credit cards, personal loan offers, and they have logic underneath them that understand the bank's underwriting, so that when a consumer visits Credit Karma or Experian, they're only ever presented with options that the publisher knows that they qualify for. This is kind of one of the big innovations of the last decade in consumer lending, is outside of direct mail, actually. Direct mail has been doing this probably since the 60s or something like that. It's been a long time. But in the digital context, lenders were always guessing around who they should be targeting for ads. And with the advent of platforms like Karma and Engine, lenders can be almost certain that when they're placing an ad that it's relevant. It's, you're getting these 80-90% type approval rates. So that's what Monevo is doing. It's the same kind of technology, although they're enabling the long tail of publishers to do the same thing.
So let's unpack that. So there's obviously major sites, like LendingTree, NerdWallet, Credit Karma, that have something like this. And then I would think a MoneyLion, an Engine, those are the big players. So when you talk about the long tail, who is this for? And what true value is Monevo bringing to their clients?
So something I've been just discussing with entrepreneurs lately is the concept of an AI native type experience, shopping experience for products. Let's say you're building an app inside of ChatGPT or Claude, one of these big LLMs, and you've decided from day one you don't actually even want a website. You want to be an application inside the LLMs that can connect a customer to the right credit card product. If you're one of those entrepreneurs, the last thing you want to do is call Chase and Amex and Capital One and the hundreds of banks as a nobody early stage entrepreneur to secure these affiliate offers. That's a huge grind and a big time investment. You'd much rather call Engine or Monevo and say, hey guys, love what you've built. You have top quality offers. I'd like to use those offers within the product I'm building, and in exchange, I'll pay you something.
So at face value, help me understand why there's immaterial impact to revenue in 26. Like, what could be causing that? Structural, macro, whatever you think. But then I almost think, I don't ask two questions at the same time, but you kind of perked something interesting. Is if I were starting from scratch, a day zero, a fundamentally new way of acquiring customers, whether it was through ChatGPT or another way, maybe Monevo is actually perfectly positioned in that type of environment. So like, help me understand those two seemingly opposites.
I mean, first start off with Monevo's success was rooted in the UK market. And I don't know a ton about the UK market on the affiliate side, but I would suspect strongly it's less competitive than the market here. So I wouldn't expect there to be a Carmen and Activate and a Sesame Connect and a Moneyline. Like, there's just so many platforms stateside that do more or less exactly what Monevo has billed as doing. The competitive density here is it's pretty hardcore. I don't know if that's true also in the UK, but I suspect it's stronger here. So I think that's part of it. The other thing, I think publishers with existing businesses, I'm putting myself in the shoes of maybe a mid-tier publisher. I do, let's say 50 million. And someone like a Monevo approaches me with this technology. One, I probably already have something like that. Maybe even if it's rudimentary, I have some semblance of a technology because I have to match a customer to an offer, like just to be in business. So I already have something. And two, I've already spent maybe a decade plus building these lender relationships. So then I'm really asking myself, what is incremental that Monevo's bringing to the table that I either can't build on my own or I don't have? Then it starts becoming like a cost benefit for me as a publisher. And where that all nets out depends on how many offers is Monevo bringing me? How much are they charging me for the service? How much better is their offer matching than my native? But those are all like cost benefit analyses that without actually using the product are hard. Like, it's hard to do those on the back of a napkin with confidence without actually purchasing the product itself. So I can see that being a point of friction for publishers. To your second question, the calculus is super different if you're day one. Like, I'd be pumped. They'd be one of my first calls, if I'm being perfect. If I were to build a publisher from scratch, the last thing I would want to do is call Chase and Amex and Capital One and try to get their deals. Like, it would take years probably through that sales cycle. If I could get through on Engine or Monevo or a platform like that, I have access to offers. So now I'm credible as a publisher because I'm bringing these household name brands to my customers. And I have a matching engine, which I don't know how good it is, but it's going to be way better than what I could build day one. And my goal as that entrepreneur running that business is like looking for some inflection point where I have enough revenue and traction in what I'm doing that I'm going to rebuild the stuff on my own. Or I'm going to determine, you know what, that's never going to be my superpower. I'm going to leave that up to Monevo, and I'm just going to build on their base and maybe renegotiate the rev share or whatever over time as you get bigger. But I think it's a no-brainer product for builders. I guess the question is how many people are building in this category?
So I'm going to pick up on, I was tongue-in-cheek last week, but I'm going to go with this story. In 6 months, we're going to call you Mr. Carlos, like Mr. Beast, and we're going to do our own thing. So let's actually assume we're doing our own acquisition engine. Why would I go to Monevo versus like a CK or a Moneyline engine? Like, help me understand just a little bit better. Like, why do we go to them? Or do I go to all of them? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, no, you actually might make a lot of phone calls. You might call all of them. The experience, the karmas of the world, as far as I'm aware, and this might be changing, but as far as I'm aware, those offer engines only can be deployed inside of their like walled gardens. So there's no outside party karma, outside party activate, as far as I'm aware. Which leaves you with Engine, Monevo, and Eagle Data is another one. Their primary business model is not to build publishers themselves, it's to power other publishers. So you would at least be making those 3 phone calls. And you'd be asking, what offers do you have? How does the technology work? How much does it cost? And you'd be kind of, actually, and Red Ventures, actually, that's another option, Nick. Red Ventures is an example where they own big publisher sites like The Points Guy, which are, super scale, and they white label their offer set to other publishers. So that's an example of a media company that plays on both sides. So I'd be calling all of them. Biggest factor day one would probably be offer coverage more than price. Because if I'm attracting a consumer to my destination, I want to make sure I have a lending option that's good for almost everybody in the credit profile.
What are you looking for across all credit scores?
Yeah.
What exactly are you looking for?
Yeah, from like 550 FICO all the way up. Do you have at least 5 credit cards? Do you have at least 5 personal loans? I would ask them to show me almost by 20-point credit bands. Show me what offers you can slot into each of those 20-point credit bands so I can make sure I'm getting comprehensive coverage across all of my segments. And look, there's publishers out there that are subprime only. They know their audiences are only 550 to 650, in which case coverage above 650 doesn't matter. You only care about a specific pool of customers. There's a world where, and I don't know if this is true, but I can think of another offer platform, Nick, while we're on this conversation. Bulldog Media Group, actually, one of our sponsors, they have a lot of concentration in subprime. So if you were to work with them as your offer partner, they're going to do really, really well in subprime cards. And they'll have a few options in prime, but they won't have as much density. So you may decide you want 2 partners, one for cards, one for loans, one for prime, one for subprime. So, but you'd have to negotiate those with the companies to make sure there's no like exclusive commits.
You just made me think of another one, potentially SoFi Lantern. Do they play as well?
SoFi Lantern, yeah, that to me, I don't know if you can go to Lantern as a publisher to get access to their inventory. I always viewed Lantern as a marketplace. So I think Lantern might actually be pulling from a Red Ventures or a Monevo or somebody like that. But yeah, it is an example of, a live example of how this ecosystem comes to life.
I'm getting this interesting anxiety. It's like, it's both excitement for like how easy and how I kind of want to just like go and do this. But then I'm also like, that sounds incredibly competitive. Like, would I have to be crazy to even try to start something like that right now, given that everything that's out there? Like, where is that opportunity with
AI specifically or more broadly?
Let's just say, where's the opportunity? Naturally, I think we have to say AI, ChatGPT, and others create new opportunities for us. But like, maybe it's something else. Maybe there's a new like analog thing, like the next thing direct mail that we can innovate on and like win there. I don't know, but like, you get the idea.
I do. It really comes down, I think, privileged access to distribution is where people are going to make names for themselves in the next, let's call it 5 years. I do think it's disproportionately social and AI, and maybe the combination of those two things. And I'll give you a dark horse one, Nick, because I've actually been spending some time thinking about is direct mail. So how you might spin up a publisher in that channel. But let's attack social and AI first, and then we'll come back to mail. And actually reminds me, so the story we covered last week around Mr. Beast. We were a little hard on him on last week's episode. I've actually softened my stance a little bit. I don't know if you saw my LinkedIn post today, but I actually think I'm giving him full credit for actually attacking what I think is a big market failure right now. And the market failure is influencers and banks aren't playing nice with each other. Influencers have a crap ton of attention in like the modern media landscape, and they're being bad stewards of the asset they have by being unreasonable with banks. Like I heard stories this week of an influencer that wanted to drop one Instagram post. This is not a made up example. One Instagram post, $85,000. And the bank said, okay. They didn't walk away. The bank said, what are we getting in return? How many impressions? What can you guarantee on the other side of that 85,000? And the influencer said, absolutely nothing. I'm just going to post and whatever happens, happens. Even if you don't get a single click, too bad. So the influencers are used to selling media a certain way. It's not compatible with the way banks like to buy inventory. They like to buy with more performance guarantee, CPAs, etc. And the banks on the flip side, they're being difficult because when they do hire these influencers and they do come to a commercial agreement, they're saying, okay, now that we've hired you and you're so great at what you do, please follow this script. Don't veer at all from it because our legal team's going to yell at you and fire you and we're going to get sued. So like they're being very rigid with what they can and can't do and they're worried about compliance. They're worried about UDAP, unfair and deceptive acts. They're worried about fair lending. They're worried about a host of very reasonable things, but they're making life so miserable for influencers that market's kind of frozen. And I think Mr. Beast noticed that and he's like, well, if I own everything, distribution, product compliance, all of it, I actually could make it work, and my odds of success are maybe much higher than anybody else out there, which I actually think is probably right. That doesn't make his odds of success good, because there's another, like we talked about some of the ways that might go sideways.
But it's also,
but I actually think if I were to build a publisher now in 2026, I'd go hard on social and I'd go hard in LLMs, because the incumbents they haven't figured out those channels yet.
It's also not winner take all, right? This isn't like you can have I'm using air quotes, small business and still be big kind of thing. So
it's also like, if you just look at where the dollars are flowing from, mass consumer attention hasn't moved into ChatGPT and Claude and these for this type of thing. To buy a credit card, no. They're still Googling best credit card and they're landing on Bankrate or NerdWallet or Karma. And they're looking at a list of 10. Like, that's the norm right now, probably 95%. And these new distribution channels, we both know, are more efficient, are better, will make better recommend. There's a million ways this wins long term, but will it take 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10? That's not clear, because the banks have to be willing to play ball. And there's a lot. And if you think there's compliance anxiety with influencers, it's like 3 times as bad with LLMs because of the hallucinations and all this. Like, so that high anxiety levels I've noticed with lenders on both of those fronts, which is why I think there's an opportunity, if you're an innovator, is to figure out how do you make those work? Because when you get the consumer attention and you figured out the right offer for the consumer, the banks follow. The banks are rational at the end of the day. They're going to follow where the consumer attention is. Having worked at Credit Karma, I saw that. Like, I remember speaking to lenders that were, there was a spectrum of skepticism around some of the innovative stuff we were doing. But eventually they all come along once they see it work for the consumer. And I think that's the key. But you have to be willing to fund that for a while. That means an innovator here, Nick, if you and I were to do this, we'd need deeper pockets probably than what we have, because we need to be burning money, driving the attention to our product to prove that it works for the consumer, and have it be enough scale that we can actually pitch it to a bank partner and like have it monetized. So it would be a very long game. Look,
this is a great conversation, Carlos. I kind of want to put it out in the ether that, we're going to have a direct mail dinner in a couple of weeks. Let's have this influencer publisher conversation. Let's open that up to see who's interested. And if people raise their hand enough, like we'll make it happen.
We'll curate that audience.
Yeah,
I'd love it. Couple other notes, Nick. If you're on the weekly news and you're not on the job board, it goes out every single Friday. We're posting somewhere on the order of 50 to 70 new jobs a week at the intersection of marketing, consumer lending, and technology. And we're actually recording with Alex Johnson on Monday. He's going to be on the pod. He has some really strong opinions on Mr. Beast and the Cash App, 2 topics we've been discussing lately. So my intention is to take the other side of, I think he's a little bit sour on the Mr. Beast idea for very good reasons, but I want to maybe play the other side of why it's a good thing for the industry, and we're going to debate that a little bit on Monday. So look out for that. I'm excited for it. We'll see you all next Friday.
Thanks, Carlos.